Hey everybody, Hayden Dingman here from PC World, and I'm here to talk to you today about mechanical keyboards, the most thrilling subject imaginable. You might know me from Full Nerd, where we put a bunch of keyboards in front of my face and had me identify them blindfolded, which I think makes me kind of qualified to talk about this. First up, let's talk about switches. We have a lot of them here. We have, let's see, 6 different keyboards in front of me, 6 different switches. That is far from the total number of switches out there. This is just a small selection. We tried to pull some of the most common switches and a couple of non-Cherry switches. What do I mean by that? Cherry MX, that is the common switch that you will see in most mechanical keyboards, especially gaming keyboards. It's a German company. They go way, way back. They had a patent on a specific kind of switch design. Switch being the thing that actually registers the keystroke on your computer. They had a patent on a certain design called a stem. It's this little crosshair shaped thing here. That's the stem design that they patented. That patent ran out in mid 2000s. And ever since then, we've had lots and lots of knockoffs. But proper Cherry keys are still one of the favorites among mechanical keyboard enthusiasts. They're durable, they're reliable, they've made a name for themselves over the years, so you will find their switches in a lot of different keyboards. They also have a pretty broad range of types of switches. So one of the most common for games especially, even though it's a fairly new switch, you see this is a red switch. What that means is it is a linear switch, and what that means is when you press it down, there's the same amount of force from top to bottom. So it's a very smooth feel, great for games because you don't have any like weird surprises. It bounces back really fast. Reds in particular are a very lightweight switch, so there's not a lot of force required to put them down. So that is your most common gaming switch, but reds are not exactly what you want for typing most of the time. For that, you would want more of a tactile switch, and that's the Cherry Blue here. The problem with these is they're loud. So if we, in here, pretty clicky. Keep your roommates annoyed all night. Just typing away. But blues are still my favorite. As somebody who has to type a lot, this is what I would usually go for. I have a lot of Cherry MX Blue keyboards at home. A little more force required than the reds, also not quite as gaming oriented. But the nice thing about a blue is that clicky part is actually at what they call the actuation point, which is where the keystroke actually registers on the computer. And so you can actually register a keystroke by just going halfway down. You'll notice as I go down, the click is actually right there, and then there's a little bit more before you actually push the key all the way down. So when you get really good at typing on Cherry MX Blues, you can actually type without ever bottoming out the keys. Very good for your wrists. The repetitive stress injuries that most people get from typing, a lot of it comes from hitting the key all the way down to the bottom. So on a blue, you don't have to do that. You can just, oh yeah, we're like halfway down. You never hear it hit the bottom. Corsair then, they partnered with Cherry. They're actually one of the people that works with Cherry the most these days. They partnered with Cherry to make the MX Silver or Speed switch. These are pretty much the same as reds, but even more lightweight. Still a linear switch. Also, the actuation point on these is 1.2 millimeters. So basically, as soon as you press this key down a little bit, it registers. That's great if you're trying to do game stuff. It can be pretty challenging if you're trying to do any sort of typing, because I've had, even if I just like rest my hands on the keyboard, I've had switches suddenly start firing off. It is like having a hair trigger on a pistol. Very, 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 very. Oh yeah, now you're typing. So those are the main Cherry keys that we're gonna cover. There's some more. MX Browns are another popular tactile switch. They're a little quieter. They have what's called a tactile bump, so you feel the tactile feedback, but there's none of this like loud clicking noise. And then blacks were the other like fairly popular switch. They were a heavier red, basically. They've actually kind of gone out of, I mean, I don't know if they were ever super popular, but especially after reds, they've kind of like fallen out of fashion. But then there's a bunch of knockoff switches. We just pulled, this is a really old Razer keyboard, so apologies to Razer for using one of their old ugly keyboards. But it does have a Razer green switch. You can see pretty much the exact same design as the Cherry switch. Has that same familiar stem design right here. Yeah, this is what happens when your patent runs out. Razer takes your switch and turns it green. Razer's got a couple others. They have an orange switch also. I think they have a yellow switch. That's their third. And then you have Logitech. They just make their own switch. They have what's called a Roamer G. We'll pull the escape key off here. You can see immediately a very different look to the bottom of this. This is the Logitech one versus this stem switch here. When we bring the keyboard over, you can see it's just a big empty square in the middle. So the nice thing about Roamer Gs is the LED is actually centered on the key. So you can see if you look at Logitech's keyboard, all the lettering here right in the center. That's different from, say, this Cougar keyboard. You can see all the letters are shifted up to the top of the switch. That's because on Cherry's design, because of the way the stem sits in the middle, the LED underneath has to be shifted up to the top, and so you have this weird like, oh, we'll just push all of the lettering on the keys up to the top. With Logitech, they don't have to do that. However, up until recently, I was not a big fan of the Roamer G. They pretty much only had an MX Brown spinoff, the tactile bump I was talking about before, but it was not great to type on. It felt really chunky. I don't know. I actually compared it to a Rubber Dome keyboard, which, for those who don't know, bottom tier keyboards, that's the one that you find at like, oh, it's $20 for this keyboard. This kind of feels like that, feels chintzy. But they put out a new version recently that's a linear switch, and then they actually put out a clicky switch after that. Both of those I like a lot more. We're now recommending Roamer G keyboards, which is great because Logitech's RGB lighting, usually some of the best in the industry. So yeah, that's a very quick primer on switches. As I said, typing, I still recommend the Cherry MX Blue. Gaming, probably a Cherry MX Red or a Speed, but honestly, Razer switches have come a long way in the past couple of years. This board that we have over here, this is their new optical switch, which we won't do a whole bunch of discussion about. We have videos on the site, but that actually uses lasers, also is very loud. Their switches have come a long way in the last couple of years. They are a lot more durable and a lot more reliable than they used to be. Roamer Gs, as I said, always a durable switch, but now they actually are pleasant to type on as long as you get the linear or the clicky versions. But yeah, I'm still gonna stick with Cherry for the most part. They have the name, they have a long history. All their keys always feel the same. I've used dozens and dozens of Cherry boards over the ensuing years, and every single one of them, if I get a Cherry MX Blue keyboard, I know how it's gonna feel every single time. It's a great switch. So let's talk design, because that's obviously the other half of this. You want something that looks nice on your desk. I assume maybe you want something that looks bad on your desk. I don't know, you do you. I'm a big fan of Razer's designs. Not so much their old designs, but their new ones. Got this beautiful lighting, super vibrant. They're pretty good with their accents too. You can't see it on this right now because we haven't lit up both of them, but there's actually a light ribbon that runs around the outside edge of this. If you're into RGB lighting, Razer's like top tier for me, right around Corsair also. The problem with design is it's all a matter of taste. I'm a big fan of keyboards that look like not gaming keyboards. If we take a look at this old Razer keyboard, it's got just this like horrible gamey typeface. It's super blocky. The caps lock is spelled LK for some reason. It's got these like awful symbols. This is like every gaming keyboard between 2005 and like 2012 looked like this garbage. And it was a terrible time for all of us, and we're glad to put it behind us, or at least I am super glad to put it behind us. For the most part though, most companies have moved over to this Razer style, like, hey, we're just gonna make a really thin Apple style keyboard. We're gonna emblazon it with like a very pretty typeface, try and keep all of our symbols minimalist. Definitely into that look more, but again, that's 100% your call. I'm pretty sure that you can look at a keyboard and know whether you actually like the way the keyboard looks. However, there are some things that we can talk about in terms of higher end features or design traits that you should be looking out for. So for instance, you'll see here we have media keys. Corsair is probably the best when it comes to media keys still. So you have a full range of stop, play, pause, back, forward, and then Corsair is great about having volume rollers. So you roll it up, you get the volume up, you roll it down, the volume goes down. They have this mute button over here. Super intuitive. very easy to use. I would recommend any keyboard you buy has a volume roller. It's absolutely my favorite design. Other things, great to look out for: a braided fabric cable. This is the, you can see actually, I think every keyboard on this desk has a braided fabric cable. It's super durable. It slides behind the desk a lot easier. Always would recommend it. It feels more high end. I've got a few keyboards still that come in with like a cheap rubber sheath cable. It just doesn't feel as nice. It doesn't slide behind the monitor very easily. Definitely would recommend this. So wrist rests. We have a couple of them here. Corsair has sort of this like wedge shaped thing here. Not incredibly high end, but it gets the job done. You've got stuff like Cougar here. They obviously take after Corsair in a lot of ways. It's just like a thin piece of plastic, but they do have this stepped wrist rest here, which I kind of like. So if you're gaming, it actually makes this left one A, more comfortable, and B, a little bit higher. You got some like this Logitech one. This is just fused into the board itself. This is Logitech's like bottom budget tier keyboard, so it's just like one big piece of plastic. And this is becoming more of a trend. This is the one that pairs with this Razer keyboard. Razer is doing this now. Logitech is doing it with the G513. Very plush wrist rest. This thing is, I don't know, about half an inch of padding. It's foam inside. It's got this nice leatherette on top. Razer has like this one, which has this edge on it, which I don't really love. Logitech's is just all edge-to-edge padding. Either way, super nice, way nicer than the wrist rest that used to come packed in. Obviously, props to Razer and Logitech. I think they're really pushing this forward. This is a thing to look out for in the next couple of years. People putting more effort into the pack-in wrist rests. Other than that, RGB lighting, that's the big one to look out for. Not a whole lot of change in between keyboards. As I said, most of them are using one of a couple of switches. So if you get a Cherry keyboard, it's always going to look like Cherry lighting. Cherry's is good. The only thing, as I said, is it's all offset. But that hasn't stopped Corsair from being like really great with their lighting. The K95 is just brilliant looking. Quite literally, it has like a whole string of lights along the top edge. Yeah, other than that, Razer's is pretty good. Theirs is, as I said, top tier for accent lighting. The top of the keyboard lighting is fine. And then Logitech, that Roamer G design is great for lighting. It looks beautiful. It shines right through the center, so you get a much more even light than something like the Cherry keyboards. RGB lighting, it's kind of whatever you want. Not huge differences either way. I wouldn't recommend going for like a cheap bottom keyboard with no name brand on it. They usually are using knockoff keys and very bad lighting. As long as you're buying from a reputable brand, including this Cougar, as I said, this is $100 for full RGB lighting. Pretty great deal. Actually a spectacular deal. Up until recently, $150 was like the bare minimum for RGB lighting. So, which I guess brings us to price. That's the last consideration when you're looking for a mechanical keyboard. Go as cheap as you can and get the features that you want. We've been heavily recommending this Cougar Attack X3 RGB keyboard. As I said, it's like $99 on Amazon all the time now. That's for a full RGB keyboard. That's unheard of. Up until recently, $150 minimum for an RGB keyboard. Most of the main manufacturers, Razer, Corsair, they're selling you $170 for an RGB keyboard. So $100, almost half the price for a full RGB keyboard. Pretty amazing. There are a couple more in that same tier now. The Fanatic Streak that I mentioned earlier. That's $130, I think, for a full RGB keyboard. Looks fantastic. But if you want to pony up the money for a nicer keyboard, you can. Logitech will sell you $150 keyboards. Corsair will sell you $150 keyboards. Razer is almost exclusively $150 to $170 keyboards these days. And you can also skimp out. The nice thing is if you don't care about RGB lighting, you can now get mechanical keyboards for cheaper than they've ever been. I think Razer's entry-level Black Widow is around $70. That's a full mechanical keyboard, but it just has no backlighting. Logitech, we've been recommending the G610 for a long time. That's Cherry keys. It's one of the only Logitech keyboards that actually uses Cherry keys still. Single color backlighting, so you're not going to get full RGB, but I think those come in around like $70, $80 usually these days. Pretty cheap. I remember back when I was getting into this, 8-9 years ago, Cheapest keyboards that you could find at the time were still like $100, and that was for single color backlighting, just a rubber cable. A lot of those were 10 keyless, meaning this number pad is not there. That was the cheapest you could get at the time. So seeing full cherry keyboards and stuff like that for under $100 and like well under $100, pretty amazing. It's never been easier to get into mechanical keyboards, and I do recommend that you get into mechanical keyboards, especially, as I said, something like a Cherry MX Blue. If you type a lot, it's really going to save your wrist over time. As somebody who uses a keyboard for like 12, 15 hours a day at times, doing game reviews, whatever, typing for my job, obviously. Yeah, it's been a constant struggle against carpal tunnel, repetitive stress injuries, all of that stuff. I'm pretty sure if I didn't have a mechanical keyboard, I would have a lot more problems than I already do. This has saved me a lot of wrist stress over the years. Definitely worth looking into if you are at an office, whatever. But yeah, that's mechanical keyboards in the shortest nutshell that I could do. It is a huge topic. There's a ton out there. If you're looking to learn more, I highly recommend the Mechanical Keyboard subreddit. Otherwise, yeah, I think that we have a ton of great reviews on the site. I would highly recommend checking them out. We have a great mechanical keyboard primer where we recommend which keyboards we think are best. It's all about what your budget is and what you're looking for. There's a ton of options. That's the great thing about mechanical keyboards. I would recommend if you have a friend that has a mechanical keyboard, go to their place, type on it a little bit. If they have an extra mechanical keyboard, ask them to borrow it, type on it for a week, see how you feel. I think that you're really going to like mechanical keyboards. It's just a question of which switch is right for you, which design is right for you, what stuff do you actually need. Do you need a volume roller? I would say yes, but some people might disagree. So we do try and inform you as best as we can through our reviews. They're all up there on the site. I am Hayden Dingman for PC World, and I hope this has been informative.